Somebody asked the pros and cons of buying versus leasing laundromats, and I'm assuming you mean the real estate for the laundromat. You guys have a short list of pros and cons?
We'd like to be able to buy them if we can, just as that additional investment. A lot of it depends on the landlord and are they willing to sell, first of all, and how good are they to deal with? We had one not great landlord that we dealt
Still
with,
have one.
and it stinks. So that's one benefit definitely of buying the property.
Yeah, no, that's definitely the case. I mean, people say control is an illusion. Well, it is to a certain extent, but it's also not. If you own the property, of course, there's always going to be somebody you're answering to, local municipality, whatever. But at least you're not answering to an individual property owner. They come along and get a sweetheart deal for somebody to build a shopping mall or something like that, and they decide to, boot you out, and you might lose everything. I mean, crazy things happen. They can find loopholes to get out of leases to where you're, stuck sitting out in the road with your equipment. Those things do happen. The flip side of that equation is, I think, honestly, a more important conversation is to talk through the process of what are your long-term ambitions and goals and what are your short-term ambitions and goals. Because it's not necessarily always the best way to deploy capital if you're trying to gain cash flow. If your number one priority is just to improve cash flow, buying real estate can tie up capital. Mm-hmm. It can leverage you, and it can really not create a lot of cash flow, but it can create a lot of other really great things. I think that's one of the things that people need to understand is there's not always, in fact, there's really never a right or wrong answer. It's what are your ambitions? What are you focusing on? If you're going to make cash flow as high as possible, then you probably don't want to take, let's say you have $1 million in liquid cash. You probably don't want to take that and pour half of it into a property that, if you're financing 75, 80% of, you're really never going to be able to get that back out unless you sell the property. There's always a balance to that. And we're kind of in a situation where we're balancing maximizing existing locations. We're also in a market where we can afford to purchase the real estate. I'm sure you're going to talk to this, Jordan, but, in some markets, it's just not an option. The property is just too expensive.
Land's a little cheaper here in Ohio.
A little bit.
No, I have some clients who are just buying land and laundromats, and I'm like, dude, how? It's just everywhere. It's like laying around. You just pick it up. It's basically free. It's crazy. I mean, yeah, I think you nailed it. I mean, I think it depends on it depends, right? On what your goals are. And, if your goal, for example, is to get out of your 9-to-5 job as quickly as possible, you probably want to lease because you're going to be able to maximize your cash flow. And then once you've gotten to that point where you've accomplished that goal, that's where you can turn around and start investing that money in the real estate or, and one great option is to sign a lease that has, it's called a first right of refusal clause in there. So that way, if the landlord decides to sell, they have to come to you and you get the first shot at it to buy it. So if your plan is to buy, but you're not ready to do that because you're trying to get out of your 9-to-5 or maximize your cash flow, whatever, you can insert a clause like the first right of refusal clause in there. And when that landlord is ready to sell, they got to come to you first, or at least let you make a bid on it to match any existing bids or something like that. So, but I love buying laundromats with real estate whenever possible.